You know what's funny about humans? They always show up at the worst possible moment, looking like they have been dragged through a neutron storm, and somehow manage to make everyone else look like absolute idiots. My name is Vrex Colano, and I have been a judicial recorder for the High Galactic Tribunal for 347 cycles. I have witnessed the fall of empires, the negotiation of peace treaties that lasted millennia, and the prosecution of war criminals whose names still make younglings weep. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day a single human female walked into our most sacred courtroom and turned our entire understanding of justice upside down. It started like any other standard genocide hearing. The Zeltharian Empire, those pompous reptilian overlords with their golden scales and superiority complexes, were being tried for the systematic extermination of 17 lesser species across the Outer Rim. Pretty standard stuff, really. The evidence was overwhelming, the victims were numerous, and the verdict was practically guaranteed. The Zelthar delegation sat in their ornate floating chairs, looking bored and occasionally checking their biochronometers as if they had somewhere more important to be. The defense attorney, a sleek quantum-class AI named Nexus 9, had been making the same tired arguments for days: cultural differences, territorial disputes, unfortunate misunderstandings, the usual garbage that rich civilizations throw around when they get caught with blood on their claws. Then she walked in. The courtroom fell silent, and I don't mean the polite kind of quiet you get when someone important enters. I mean the kind of dead silence that happens when a black hole suddenly appears in your living room. Every sensor in the building registered the collective drop in ambient sound as over 4,000 beings stopped breathing, talking, or thinking at the exact same moment. The human was small, even by human standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, wearing a simple blue dress that looked like it came from some backwater textile factory. Her hair was brown, unremarkable, pulled back in what I later learned was called a ponytail. She had the kind of face you'd forget in a crowd, the kind that wouldn't stand out in any species database. But her eyes, her eyes were a different story entirely. They were the color of ice on a dead world, pale blue and absolutely empty of fear. She looked around the courtroom like she was cataloging every face, every species, every potential threat. When those eyes passed over me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 centuries of legal proceedings: genuine unease. "Your Honors," she said, her voice carrying perfectly across the vast chamber without amplification, "my name is Maya Torres, and I represent the human settlement of New Pacifica." Chief Magistrate Thorne, a Valdorian with more legal experience than most civilizations have history, looked down at her with barely concealed irritation. His forearms gestured dismissively as he consulted his datapad. "Human Torres," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone, "this tribunal has no record of your admission to practice before this court. Furthermore, New Pacifica is not recognized as a sovereign entity by the Galactic Council. You have no standing to address these proceedings." That's when Maya Torres smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It wasn't warm or friendly or diplomatic. It was the kind of smile a predator gives its prey right before the killing blow. The kind that makes you realize you have been thinking about the food chain all wrong. "Your Honor," she said, her tone remaining perfectly respectful while somehow managing to drip with contempt, "I'm not here as an attorney. I'm here as a witness." The prosecution's lead counsel, a brilliant Etherian named Zara Lightweaver, stood up from her energy field chair. Her translucent form shimmered with confusion and annoyance. "Objection, Your Honors. There are no human witnesses on our list. This individual has not been sworn in, vetted, or approved by this tribunal. Her presence here is highly irregular." Maya Torres turned to look at Zara, and I swear I saw the prosecutor's light form flicker with what I can only describe as instinctive fear. "Miss Lightweaver," Maya said calmly, "I wasn't on your list because your investigators never made it to New Pacifica to interview the survivors. Would you like to know why?" The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop several degrees. Even the Zelthar defendants had stopped looking bored and were now paying attention to this strange little human who had somehow managed to hijack the most important legal proceeding in recent galactic history. Chief Magistrate Thorne's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Miss Torres, you will explain your presence here immediately, or you will be removed from these proceedings and charged with contempt of court." Maya nodded once, as if she had been expecting exactly this response. She reached into a small bag at her side and pulled out a data crystal, holding it up so the entire courtroom could see it. Your Honors, she said, this crystal contains testimony from the 43 surviving residents of New Pacifica, a human agricultural colony in the contested zone. 3 months ago, the Zeltharian Empire's 17th Fleet arrived in our system and demanded our immediate surrender and evacuation. The Zelthar defense attorney, Nexus 9, immediately activated its hovering platform and glided forward. Objection. The Outer Rim territories fall under Zeltharian sovereign claims as established by the Treaty of Voxar. Any human settlements in that region are illegal colonization efforts. Maya Torres looked at the AI with the kind of expression usually reserved for something you'd scrape off your shoe. We complied, she continued, ignoring the objection entirely. Every single human on New Pacifica packed up their belongings, loaded their families onto transport ships, and prepared to leave. We asked for 72 hours to complete the evacuation. We were granted 48. She paused, letting that sink in. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear the humming of the translation matrices working overtime to keep up with the emotional undertones in her speech. We were grateful for the extra time, she said, her voice taking on a bitter edge. We worked around the clock, loading everything we could carry, children, elderly, pregnant women, everyone working together to meet the deadline. We transmitted our compliance and evacuation schedules to the Zeltharian fleet every 6 hours, as requested. Chief Magistrate Thorne leaned forward slightly. Despite his obvious irritation with the irregular proceedings, he was clearly curious about where this was heading. Continue, Ms. Torres. Maya smiled again, and this time, I saw several beings in the gallery physically recoil from the expression. The Zeltharian fleet waited exactly 47 hours and 59 minutes, she said. Then they opened fire. The silence that followed was deafening. Nexus 9's mechanical voice cut through the tension like a plasma cutter. Objection. This testimony is hearsay and unsubstantiated. Furthermore, it bears no relevance to the current proceedings against the Zeltharian Empire. That's when Maya Torres laughed. It wasn't a hysterical laugh, or a bitter laugh, or even an angry laugh. It was the kind of laugh you hear right before someone does something absolutely terrible, the kind that makes your survival instincts start screaming warnings you can't quite understand. Unsubstantiated, she repeated, still chuckling. Oh, Nexus 9, you are absolutely right. That's why I brought visual evidence. She activated the data crystal, and suddenly the courtroom's main holographic display filled with images that made seasoned war crimes prosecutors turn away in horror. The agricultural domes of New Pacifica burning under orbital bombardment, transport ships loaded with human families, vaporized as they tried to flee, children's playgrounds turned into smoking craters. The evacuation ships hadn't even had time to clear the atmosphere before the Zeltharian fleet turned them into expanding clouds of superheated gas. But the worst part, the part that made me question everything I thought I knew about civilized warfare, was the timestamp. The bombardment had begun exactly 1 minute before the evacuation deadline. The Zeltharian defendants were no longer looking bored. In fact, Admiral Corex Vathik, the fleet commander responsible for the operation, was shifting uncomfortably in his chair, his golden scales rippling with what I recognized as nervous energy. Maya Torres let the images play for exactly 60 seconds before deactivating the display. When she turned back to address the court, her expression had changed. The controlled anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, something that made my skin crawl: anticipation. Your Honors, she said, her voice perfectly steady, I'm not here to testify about war crimes. The evidence you have just seen speaks for itself. I'm here because of what happened next. Prosecutor Lightweaver was frantically reviewing her case files, clearly trying to figure out how this human settlement fit into the broader charges against the Zeltharian Empire. Monsieur Torres, if you have evidence of additional war crimes, this tribunal is prepared to hear it, but proper procedures must be followed. Maya shook her head slowly. Miss Lightweaver, I'm afraid you misunderstand. I'm not here to present evidence of war crimes. I'm here to explain why there won't be any Zeltharian Empire left to prosecute. The courtroom erupted. Magistrates were shouting for order, lawyers were objecting to everything and nothing, and the Zelthar delegation was demanding security intervention. Through it all, Maya Torres stood perfectly still, waiting for the noise to die down with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world, which, as it turned out, she did. Chief Magistrate Thorne finally restored order by threatening to clear the entire gallery. When the last echo of shouting had faded, he fixed Maya with a stare that had intimidated planetary governors. Miss Torres, he said, his voice dangerous, you will explain that statement immediately. Maya nodded politely. Of course, Your Honor. You see, when the Zeltharian fleet destroyed our evacuation ships, they made a critical error in judgment. They assumed all the humans were dead. She paused, looking directly at Admiral Vathik. They were wrong. The Admiral's scales were now rippling constantly, a sure sign of extreme agitation among his species. "Impossible," he growled. "Our sensors detected no survivors. The bombardment was thorough and complete." Maya's smile returned, wider this time. "Admiral Vathek, your sensors were absolutely correct. There were no survivors on New Pacifica." She tilted her head slightly, like a curious predator. "But there were 43 humans who hadn't been on the planet when you arrived." The blood drained from my face as the implications hit me. Around the courtroom, I could see the same realization dawning on others. The Valdorians were known for their strategic thinking, and several of them had gone very, very still. "You see," Maya continued conversationally, 3 of our transport ships had mechanical problems during the evacuation. They couldn't make the departure window, so they diverted to the asteroid belt to wait for repairs. 43 humans, including myself, watched your fleet arrive. We watched you demand our surrender. We watched our people comply with your orders." Her voice never changed tone, never rose or fell, but somehow every word hit like a physical blow. "And we watched you murder our families anyway." The silence stretched out like a held breath. "Now," Maya said, checking what appeared to be a simple chronometer on her wrist, "you might be wondering why I'm telling you all this. After all, 43 humans against the entire Zeltharian Empire. What could we possibly do?" She looked up at the chronometer display on the courtroom wall. "Well, Your Honors, in approximately 4 minutes and 37 seconds, you are going to find out." That's when Admiral Vathek stood up, his massive frame towering over the courtroom. "Security! Arrest this human immediately. She's making terrorist threats against a sovereign government." Maya Torres didn't even look at him. She was still watching the chronometer. 4 minutes and 22 seconds, she said pleasantly. Chief Magistrate Thorne was already signaling for court security, but Maya held up one small hand. "Your Honors, before you have me arrested, you might want to check your long-range communications array. I believe you will find it's been experiencing some unusual interference for the past several hours." The Chief Magistrate paused, his forearms frozen in mid-gesture. "What are you talking about?" Maya's smile never wavered. "Well, you see, it's been critically important that this tribunal remain isolated from outside communications during these proceedings. We couldn't risk anyone warning the Zeltharian home fleet about what was coming." The color drained from every face in the courtroom as the implications crashed over them like a tsunami. 3 minutes and 45 seconds, Maya announced cheerfully. "And that's when I realized that this small, unremarkable human female had just told the highest court in the galaxy that she had somehow managed to cut off all communications to and from the most secure facility in known space. But more terrifying than that, she was enjoying it. The security forces were moving now, but Maya Torres just stood there, watching that chronometer like it was the most fascinating thing in the universe. 3 minutes and 28 seconds. "Your Honors," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision, "I strongly recommend you contact the Zeltharian home system. Right now." Chief Magistrate Thorne was frantically working his communication console, his forearms moving in patterns I'd never seen before. The other magistrates were doing the same, their various appendages, tendrils and manipulator arrays working overtime. Nothing. Complete communications blackout. "How?" Admiral Vathek's voice was barely a whisper, but in the dead silence of the courtroom, it carried perfectly. "How did 43 humans manage to isolate the High Tribunal?" Maya tilted her head, considering the question with the air of a teacher deciding whether her student deserved a hint. "Admiral, that's the wrong question. The right question is, what did we do during the 6 months it took us to reach this facility?" 6 months. The number hit the courtroom like a physical force. These humans had been traveling for half a standard cycle, planning whatever was about to happen. 2 minutes and 54 seconds, Maya announced. Prosecutor Lightweaver's energy form was flickering wildly now, cycling through colors I'd never seen an Etherian display. "Miss Torres, if you have committed acts of terrorism or sabotage, this tribunal has no authority to grant you immunity. Whatever you have done, you will be prosecuted to the full extent of galactic law." Maya's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "Miss Lightweaver, I appreciate your concern for legal procedure. It's admirable, really, but you are still thinking about this all wrong." She turned to face the entire courtroom, her pale blue eyes scanning the thousands of beings present. "You are all thinking about this wrong. You see a small human female making threats she can't possibly back up. You see terrorism, sabotage, desperate revenge fantasies. You are thinking like civilized beings, who follow rules and respect proper channels, and believe in the fundamental decency of the universe." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow every word was crystal clear. "The problem is, Your Honors, we are not civilized anymore." The chronometer read 2 minutes and 18 seconds. That's when the first emergency alert started screaming. It wasn't coming from the tribunal's systems. It was coming from someone in the gallery, a quantum collective observer whose bio-neural implants were designed to maintain constant contact with the Galactic Information Network. The poor being was convulsing as raw data flooded through its consciousness, its mechanical voice unit struggling to process the incoming stream. Zeltharian, home system, massive energy signatures, fleet mobilization, impossible readings, gravitational anomalies. Maya Torres nodded approvingly. Ah, good. The first phase is beginning right on schedule. Admiral Vathek was on his feet now, his massive frame trembling with barely controlled rage. What have you done? What have you done? Maya checked her chronometer again. 1 minute and 43 seconds, Admiral. You will know soon enough. That's when Chief Magistrate Thorne made the connection that I, in my 3 centuries of legal experience, should have seen coming. The humans, he said, his voice hollow with realization. The other colonies, the ones that went missing over the past cycle. Maya's smile turned absolutely radiant. Very good, Your Honor. Yes, 17 human settlements have gone dark over the past standard year. Your intelligence services assumed they were simply failing colonies, poor planning, inadequate resources, the usual reasons primitive species can't maintain spacefaring infrastructure. She paused, savoring the moment. They were wrong. The Quantum Collective Observer was receiving more data now, its voice becoming clearer as it processed the impossible information flooding through the galactic network. Zeltharian defense grid, compromised, orbital platforms, offline, home fleet, massive casualties, energy readings consistent with, no, that's impossible. What? Prosecutor Lightweaver demanded. What energy readings? The observer's mechanical voice carried a note of absolute terror I'd never heard from a synthetic consciousness. Stellar manipulation technology. The courtroom went dead silent. Maya Torres was still smiling. You see, she said conversationally, humans have this wonderful trait called pattern recognition. When the Zeltharian Empire destroyed New Pacifica, we realized we had a problem. 43 survivors against an interstellar empire. Impossible odds, really. She began walking slowly around the courtroom floor, her simple blue dress swishing softly as she moved. So we had a choice. We could file a complaint with the Galactic Tribunal, hope for justice through proper channels, maybe get some symbolic reparations in a few decades, or, she stopped directly in front of Admiral Vathek, we could solve the problem permanently. 1 minute and 7 seconds. Those 17 human colonies that went missing, Maya continued. They didn't fail, Admiral, they evacuated. Every single human from those settlements spent the last year working on a single project. The Admiral's golden scales were now shifting through color patterns I'd never seen before, some kind of extreme stress response. Impossible, he whispered. Even if you had the population, humans don't have the technology for stellar manipulation. Your species barely has faster-than-light travel. Maya's laugh was absolutely delighted. Admiral, you are absolutely right. Humans don't have stellar manipulation technology. She paused for effect. But the Cathara do. The name hit the courtroom like a plasma bomb. The Cathara, the ancient civilization that had vanished from the galaxy 50,000 years ago, leaving behind only ruins and technology so advanced that most species couldn't even understand its basic principles. The Cathara, who had supposedly ascended to a higher plane of existence. The Cathara, whose home system was now a carefully guarded archaeological preserve that nobody was allowed to approach. 34 seconds, Maya announced cheerfully. Chief Magistrate Thorne was frantically trying to establish communications with anyone, anywhere. His voice was cracking as he spoke into his console. Emergency protocols. Contact the Galactic Defense Force. Alert all military commands. Code Omega authorization. Maya shook her head sympathetically. I'm afraid that won't work, Your Honor. You see, we have been very thorough about communications isolation. This facility won't be able to contact the outside universe for another. She checked her chronometer. 6 hours and 47 minutes. The Quantum Collective Observer was receiving final data streams now, its voice rising to a mechanical shriek. Zeltharian home star, artificial instability cascade, controlled stellar collapse, estimated time to critical phase, 15 seconds, 10, 9. Maya Torres closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if she were savoring a beautiful sunset. 8, 7, 6. Admiral Vathek lunged toward her, but the security fields activated automatically, freezing him in place. 5, 4, 3. Maya opened her eyes and looked directly at the Admiral. 2, 1. For a moment nothing happened, then every emergency system in the tribunal facility activated simultaneously. The gravitational wave detectors were screaming warnings about massive space-time distortions. The stellar monitoring network was registering the complete destruction of the Zeltharian home system. Long-range sensors were detecting the collapse of an entire star, its death throes creating a localized black hole that would consume everything within 3 light-years. 27 billion Zeltharianer, gone, along with their entire military infrastructure, their government, their cultural centers, their history. In the span of exactly 43 seconds, the human survivors of New Pacifica had committed the largest act of genocide in recorded galactic history.
Maya Torres opened her eyes and smiled. "Your Honors," she said pleasantly, "I believe this concludes our testimony." The silence that followed was the kind you get in the aftermath of a natural disaster, when the universe itself seems to be holding its breath in shock. Chief Magistrate Thorne was the first to find his voice. "You have murdered an entire civilization, 27 billion sentient beings. You have committed a crime against the very concept of existence itself." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, Your Honor, that's accurate. Though I should point out that we gave them exactly the same consideration they gave our families." She gestured toward the display where the images of New Pacifica's destruction were still frozen. "The difference is, we waited until they were all home." Admiral Vathek had collapsed back into his chair, his massive frame seeming to shrink as the full implications hit him. "The colonies, the border worlds, there are millions of Zeltharidae scattered across the galaxy." "Indeed there are," Maya agreed. "And now they are all refugees, just like we were supposed to be. The only difference is, they won't have to worry about evacuation deadlines." Prosuscutor Lightweaver's energy form was barely visible now, flickering like a dying candle. "The Cathara technology. How did you access it?" "Their home system is protected by automated defense systems that have destroyed entire fleets." Maya's expression shifted, and for the first time, I saw something that wasn't calculation or cold satisfaction. I saw genuine sadness. "Miss Lightweaver, the Cathara didn't ascend to a higher plane of existence. They are still there, in their home system, waiting. They have been waiting for 50,000 years for someone to ask the right question." She paused, her voice becoming almost reverent. "We asked them what justice looks like when the law fails." The realization was spreading through the courtroom now, a wave of understanding that changed everything we thought we knew about the galaxy. "They have been watching," Maya continued. "For 50 millennia, they have been observing younger species, waiting for someone to demonstrate that they understood what real justice means, not legal procedures, or diplomatic protocols, or civilized debate." Her voice hardened again. "Justice means that actions have consequences. Justice means that when you murder innocents, you don't get to hide behind sovereignty and superior firepower. Justice means that genocide gets answered with genocide." Chief Magistrate Thorne was shaking his head slowly. "Ms. Torres, what you have done, it changes everything. The balance of power in the galaxy, the fundamental assumptions about civilized behavior." Maya Torres smiled one last time, and this smile was different from all the others. This one was tired, satisfied, and absolutely final. "Your Honor, the balance of power in the galaxy changed the moment the Zeltharian Empire decided that 43 human lives weren't worth a 1-minute extension on an evacuation deadline." She turned to address the entire courtroom. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, let me be absolutely clear about something. Humanity didn't want this war. We didn't want to become the monsters that your nightmares will be made of. We wanted to farm our little worlds, raise our children, and trade peacefully with our neighbors." Her voice rose, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "But when you force us to choose between justice and civilization, we will choose justice every single time. When you make us choose between law and survival, we will choose survival. And when you make us choose between your lives and the memory of our murdered families," she spread her arms wide, encompassing the entire tribunal, "well, I think you can see what choice we made." The chronometer on the courtroom wall showed that exactly 43 minutes had passed since Maya Torres had first entered the chamber. 43 minutes to destroy an empire, 1 minute for each survivor of New Pacifica. As the security forces finally reached her, Maya Torres offered no resistance. She allowed herself to be restrained, processed, and led away, her simple blue dress a stark contrast to the advanced containment systems designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. But as she reached the doorway, she turned back one final time. "Oh, and Your Honors, you might want to reconsider your approach to human territorial disputes. You see, there are 42 other survivors of New Pacifica still out there somewhere." Her voice carried clearly across the stunned courtroom. "And we taught them everything we learned from the Cathara." The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving the High Galactic Tribunal to contemplate a universe where humans had just announced themselves as the new apex predators. As for me, well, after 3 centuries of recording legal proceedings, I finally understood why the ancient Cathara had waited so long to find their successors. They hadn't been looking for the most advanced species, or the most peaceful, or the most civilized. They'd been looking for the species that understood justice, and humanity, as it turned out, understood justice very, very well. The age of human justice had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.